Okay, live on Instagram, live on YouTube. Here we are. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the channel, the Instagram, whatever you want to view it on. Um, we are here with Adam of Lost Lantern. And if you are unfamiliar, Lost Lantern is a U.S. independent bottler. My opinion, for whatever it's worth, probably one of the best independent bottlers there is in as far as uh, all independent bottlers, not just the U.S., but definitely the best in the U.S. So, with that, I'll let Adam say hi, introduce himself, and we'll get going.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to do this. Yeah, as you said, I'm the co-founder and the head of whiskey sourcing for Lost Lantern. We're a Vermont-based independent bottler. So if we have any internet issues, you can blame it on the Vermont infrastructure and the dirt roads and dirt internet cables that we rely on. But yeah, we really had the vision to create Lost Lantern as an independent bottler for American whiskey, modeled on the great independent bottlers of Scotland, of sourcing whiskey with full transparency and where it comes from, to help people discover whiskey that they haven't necessarily had before, or from distilleries that they haven't experienced before. And I'm glad to hear you say that you think we're in the top tier, because I love to hear that, and we hope so as well.
Yeah, you absolutely are. I love independent bottlers as far as everything goes. Um, Scotch, American, all of it. And yeah, definitely. I definitely really enjoy every Lost Lantern I've ever tasted or purchased.
Well, thank you. How did do you remember how you found us in the first place?
So through the Whiskey Tribe, actually, a couple people had talked about it, and I was like, well, what is this Lost Lantern, because they were showing distilleries that I've never heard of and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I would love to be able to get those, but you can't order it from the distillery and you can't find it in the store and so on and so forth. And so I did an internet search, Lost Lantern, found you guys, and lo and behold, I was able to order from you and get it shipped right to well, I get it shipped to work, but um, get it shipped right to me. And I haven't looked back since. So I remember my very first order was a rather large order for me. I think it was 7 bottles. And I think that was just about everything you had at that time, minus a few other ones that I ended up picking up shortly after.
Nice. Yeah, I know you've been picking up stuff for a while now, which is great to see, because I hope that it's helped you discover some places that you didn't necessarily know about otherwise.
It definitely has, which we will get into one of them a little bit later here, I think.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm excited to chat with you now, because this is right around the corner from the launch of our Midwest collection, which is our spring collection. It's the first time we've ever done a regionally focused collection of American whiskey, and we chose the Midwest because we really think that it's one of the most unique and exciting parts of the country, and the whiskey that they're making now is really of the highest quality, and a lot of places that people don't really know about. Like, I love Texas whiskey, but people who are making Texas whiskey are not shy about telling you about how great it is. Whereas from the Midwest, sometimes they're a little more humble about it and don't like to brag about it. So we are, as non-Midwesterners, are taking that on for ourselves and going out there and saying, these are the whiskeys from the Midwest that you need to know about. And the place that we're really excited about from all across the region.
That kind of sums up the Midwest in one sentence. We do like to be a little bit more humble, and we just know that there's some good things here, and we don't have to put it out there to the world, and people will at some point in time discover it. I, for instance, however, do also agree with you that the Midwest puts out some of the best whiskey in the country, and I will sing that from the mountains because I think everybody should know about it.
But you don't have mountains in the Midwest.
We don't have, well, we got a couple hills, but that works.
Yeah. But it truly is something we've noticed for years. Like, when we first started Lost Lantern, my co-founder Nora and I took an 8-month road trip around the country and visited distilleries in every corner of the U.S. And then we did a separate month-long Midwest road trip after that. And it really surprised us at that time because it's probably the area of the country that had the most distilleries that we had never heard of before that were really, really good, along with some places that we already knew and loved, like Cedar Ridge. That it's just, there are a lot of people there just quietly making really, really good whiskey. And that was 5 years ago, so their whiskey's even better now. And we're really excited to showcase a bunch of these places in the Midwest collection, both more well-known places like Starlight and ones like Wollersheim that are not well-known outside of their home state.
Okay. That being said, too, that brings up a question I did have. So you were kind of in the spirits industry, or you were in the spirits industry before Lost Lantern, Nora as well. You were with Whiskey Advocate magazine, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it was
yes. Okay. And what, like, take me through conception of the idea of making Lost Lantern to releasing the first release. How did that look?
Well, it actually started. So as you said, I was a journalist. I was writing for Whiskey Advocate, reviewing American whiskeys from around the country. And Nora was working at Astor Wines and Spirits in New York, which is one of the best wine and spirit stores in the country. Great, amazing whiskey selection. And she ran the sales floor there. And we both saw that there were a lot of really interesting whiskeys from, at the time, non-traditional places that were starting to get really, really good. And I was always hearing from people that like were a little skeptical of whiskey that was not from Kentucky or Tennessee or Scotland or wherever else it may be. But I saw that some of these places had started to be around for a little while, like places like Balcones, and had really honed in on what they were doing and were making whiskey that was not just whiskey that had potential to be great in the future, but whiskey that was really good right now. And I was actually writing a story about Scotch independent bottlers and the role that they play in Scotland, and just started thinking like, this is the model for how to get some of these distilleries out there, to help people discover them if they don't know already, if they're skeptical, to say like, we're the ones who've done the work and vetted them, and these are the places we think you need to know. But it didn't start out as like, here's a business idea that we're going to do. It was just the idea that somebody should start an independent bottler for American whiskey, and I bet someday they'll do that. And we waited, like, talked about it for a year or two and kept bouncing the idea back and forth. And eventually we were like, why has nobody done this yet? Until we realized that we were actually the perfect people to do it, because we were in the industry. We knew the people who were making this whiskey. We had already worked with some of them in my capacity as a journalist. And we were the ones that were best positioned to start to hunt down this whiskey. So that's sort of how it went from an idea that someone should do to an idea that we should do. And that's when we decided to take an 8-month road trip around the country and pitch the idea to distilleries around the U.S.
Excellent. I mean, that 8-month road trip sounds like an awesome trip. I mean, maybe not for some people, but I definitely would. That would be an awesome trip.
Yeah. It was incredible. And I grew up in the Northeast. I'm from upstate New York. My wife is from Vermont. We both lived in Brooklyn for a long time, and we were both well-traveled in some ways, but really hadn't spent much time going around the U.S. besides for the big cities. So that was really our first time driving across country, going to some of the great national parks like Yellowstone and Yosemite, and also visiting whiskey distilleries in places that you would never find any reason to go to otherwise. Like places like Wyoming Whiskey, which is in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming, is probably the most remote distillery I've ever been to in the world. And even places like Balcones and Waco, like I don't know that my life would have taken me to Waco if not for whiskey.
Sure.
And I love seeing those corners of the country that are doing really interesting things that just aren't necessarily as widely known, especially to like New Yorkers like I was.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. I mean, that's the thing. You find little hidden gems in the most unsuspecting places.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And that led to us buying barrels, and then we eventually launched. We were supposed to launch in April 2020. The world slowed things down a little bit on that front, but we ended up launching that fall instead, doing the online model. So we work with retailers like Sealbox who can ship to around 40 states. So it helps us get our whiskey out there much more widely than we thought originally. And now we've worked with more than 30 distilleries in about 20 states, and more all the time. And this collection has 3 new distilleries and 2 new states for us in Wisconsin and Illinois.
Excellent. 3 new distilleries in 2 different states. So
our Wollersheim is our first Wisconsin, Few Spirits is our first Illinois, and Middle West is actually our 3rd distillery that we've worked with from Ohio. So
okay.
Ohio is tied with New York and Texas for the place we've worked with the most distilleries.
Perfect. Well, speaking of what's coming up, let's why don't we get into the first one?
Yeah, let's do it. The first whiskey in the flagship whiskey in the Midwest collection is called Far Flung Rye. I forget if you picked up our Far Flung bourbon, but I'm sure you tried it at a Bastard's Ball, if not. And this is in some ways the sequel to that. It's a blend of straight ryes from multiple distilleries. And in this case, all of them come from the Midwest. As we started blending it, before we'd even had the idea for the Midwest collection, we realized that all the ryes that we really liked and were playing with, a lot of them came from the Midwest already. And when we decided to do a Midwest focused collection, it was natural to make this a regional blend of whiskeys. So this brings together whiskey from 5 distilleries, from Starlight in Indiana, Tom's Foolery in Middle West in Ohio, Cedar Ridge in Iowa, and Wollersheim in Wisconsin.
Excellent. The name Far Flung. Now you use that on the bourbon, and now you're using it here. What's the premise behind the name Far Flung?
The idea is that it's whiskey that's coming from all over. There are a lot of whiskey blends in American whiskey history, many of which are like blends of whiskey from Kentucky and Tennessee and Indiana, and they can be really, really good. But those places are all pretty close together. What does it look like if you start blending whiskey from very, very different climates and environments together, or from even just from the far corners of the Midwest, from Iowa to Ohio? It's bringing together flavors in a way that would never happen on its own. So that's where the name Far Flung comes from. And it's alliterative, and we like alliteration.
That's excellent. Are you planning on continuing that label, that line Far Flung, throughout maybe not every release, but other releases that come about?
Yeah, not every release, but we'll definitely you'll see the return of that. So we did Far Flung Bourbon already. This is Far Flung Rye. Safe to say that we'll do probably do both of them again at some point, but they'll be different. The Far Flung Rye number 2 probably won't be a blend of ryes from the Midwest. It'll maybe something else.
Sure.
So everyone will have its own unique angle, but keeping that idea of bringing whiskey from very different places together.
I love that. That's awesome. Just on the nose right away, this thing is excellent. I got it on a ticker on the bottom, but we are looking at 60.8%.
Yeah, 121.6 proof. So that we don't kid around with proof in general. We generally do everything at cask strength, because if you want to add water, pretty easy to do that at home. That's
right. Yeah, and giving us the option to do so is perfect. And tasting it at full volume is definitely something you should do at least once.
Yeah, I agree. And I often, when I'm drinking whiskey rather than tasting whiskey, I often like to put it on a big rock. Nora drinks everything straight. I drink a lot of things straight, and sometimes I put it on ice, especially in the summer. But if I'm tasting for review or for consideration for the time, then always do neat.
So the Midwest, to me, and this is my opinion, the ryes that come out of the Midwest and Wisconsin specifically, I'm gonna be a little biased towards Wisconsin here, but they have this thing about them that I feel is just nicer and just a touch better than a lot of other ryes out there. And I'm not sure if it's climate related or if it's Wisconsin distilleries using a specific grain from the state, soil conditions, yada, 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 water, whatever the case may be. But there's always something about a Wisconsin rye, and this goes through many distilleries, Wollersheim being one of them, Driftless Glen, other distilleries throughout the state, that the rye whiskeys, for some reason, just have this extra layer of for a lack of a better term, loveliness to them that a lot of other rides don't have. And I really enjoy the rides out of Wisconsin. And the Midwest in general, I've had ryes from a few different distilleries throughout the Midwest, and they're all in a similar vein as far as just being exquisite ryes. And I'm thinking it's an agricultural thing, the grain itself, perhaps, who knows. Um, but yeah, I enjoy it, and I can taste it in here. Um, there is some different ones in here that I can definitely tell there's something different going on, but I get that extra layer of a little bit of that mintiness or that creaminess that comes with some of the Wisconsin ryes that I've had.
Yeah, and that's exactly how we think about Midwestern whiskey in general. Is that because that's and you're in the breadbasket of the country, and all the distillers there are usually relatively close to the grain that's being grown, both physically, like literally relatively close to it, but also many of them are farmers or getting it from farmers that they know or work with, and put a lot of care into the selecting the grain that they use. And I think that is reflected in the final whiskey. But the cooler climate compared to Kentucky, I also think makes a big difference. And the creaminess that you mentioned is exactly what we say about the Midwestern whiskey. It's like the common thread that we think you'll see with all of these. That like they're not as crazy high proof as things we've done for the Mountain West. They all have this underlying creaminess and texture to it, and a little bit of spice that to us is starting to be one of the signifiers for the Midwest as a whiskey region.
Absolutely. So when you make this blend, obviously you have whatever amount of barrels you have from each distillery. Do you use the entire barrel, or do you proportion and find a blend that works for you guys in a small amount, obviously, and then extrapolate that proportion to how you blend it, and then perhaps you have some left over in certain barrels, or do you pretty much use the entire barrel?
So we do start with making it with what's called a tabletop blend, where it's like doing small proportional, like adding 20 to 50 milliliters at a time and creating different little blends and then comparing them against each other. And it usually doesn't end up being full barrels of everything. So for this, like with the Tom's Foolery, we only used the portion of Tom's Foolery that went into this was 9 years old, and we only used probably less than a quarter of that barrel from it. Whereas the Middle West was a full barrel of that. And it's really just what makes the whiskey taste best. And we keep iterating on it and doing it again and again until we think we have it at the best it can be. And with this whiskey, it was really interesting because we got it to the point where it was like 90 to 95% of where we wanted it to be, and couldn't quite get it all the way there. And eventually, just a week before Christmas last year, we realized that we needed something else that we didn't have in house. And I called up Murphy Quint at Cedar Ridge and said, "We've done one of your malted rye barrels before as a single cask. We played around with it and saw that works really well with this blend. How can we get a rye cask from you like in 2 weeks, knowing that it's right around the holidays?" And he helped us make it happen. Got the barrel in by mid-January, and that went into the blend as well. So, and that malted rye, I thought, really tied the whole thing together.
Mm-hmm. So there's a question in the comments here, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you answer. What distillery has been your favorite in the last year?
I'd say if I'm talking outside of Midwest distilleries, since we haven't officially released those yet, I think my favorite new discovery for us has been Corbin Cash in California, which makes amazing rye. From the Midwest, it has to be Tom's Foolery, which is what I think you thought I was going to say. But I'm curious what you guessed.
My guess was actually Corbin Cash. That's what I thought, because I had talked to you about this before. But as far as this Midwest one, I was gonna probably guess Wollersheim. I have visited them, and I think the grounds on that place is just amazing, and the building is beautiful for the distillery. The restaurant and the wine area up on the top of the hill is old and just really unique. their little hobbit hut in the hill in the back is really cool too. I did not get to go in there. I would like to see what that's all about in there, but that's a beautiful place. Obviously, I have not been to Tom's Foolery. That is one of the distilleries that I was introduced to through Lost Lantern with that bourbon that you released this past year, and I'm definitely on board with anything they make. I don't even need to question if it says Tom's Foolery on it. I'm picking it up.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to try the rye single cask, which we'll do third. That'll be a fun one.
Okay, so yeah, I mean this rye, this Far Flung rye, it has definitely got a nice mintiness to it. Obviously, you get your barrel notes. I try not to be very specific on what I pick up on notes because it's different for every person. Obviously, there's like, I mean, one person could say, obviously, there's a mintiness to it. They could say spearmint, or they could say wintergreen or peppermint. You know, whatever their mind is triggered by the smell. It's a mintiness. We got that. But specifically, what mintiness is it? It doesn't really matter what I find, but what you find it's going to be what you find. There's definitely a nice herbaceous quality.
I think I love the way that it brings together, I think, the best features of some of the ryes of the Midwest that we've seen, and it tastes different from all of them individually. And I know because I tasted all the barrels that went into this. I've tasted whiskey from all these distilleries, and all of them are subtly different. And basically, each one of those is like they're like different colors on a palette, and each of those colors is beautiful on its own. But then you can combine them in a way and like make a pretty picture that's a little different than any of them individually.
I love that analogy. The one really unique thing that's standing out in this glass to me is like a really roasty nuttiness, and I think that it's wild. I don't know as if I've had a rye that's had this level of like roasted nuts in it. And I'm really digging that.
That's interesting. I wonder if that's from. My guess is that's probably partly coming from the Middle West, which is a pumpernickel rye.
That dark pumpernickel rye, yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. You know, and with these blends, you end up getting quite a bit more bottles,
yeah,
than you do on the single cask, obviously. What kind of bottle count did you get on this Far Flung rye?
This one is relatively small. It's smaller than the Far Flung bourbon. It's only about 500 bottles, which shows you that it's definitely not a full barrel of everything.
Sure.
But really wanted to showcase how the flavors came together. But also, it is nice to have things that are larger than a single cask. Because like the Tom's Foolery, I think we got like 130 bottles or something of that. And when it launches next Wednesday, I don't expect it will necessarily last particularly long as a single cask. So having something that's a little more available while still being cask strength and we think showing a really unique perspective on whiskey is nice to have.
I know that Tom's Foolery bourbon sold out on launch day, didn't it?
Yeah, which was funny because we in that release last year we always make our internal like fun predictions over what's going to go well, what's not going to, like what are people going to gravitate towards, and that was not on our list of things that we thought were going to sell out on day one. We knew that our Boulder, Colorado cask was going to sell out. That was a hazmat. We thought our Iron Root Texas bourbon would come and go, which it did. But the Tom's Foolery was a distillery that was not very widely known. I feel like a lot of people have discovered them now through us. And we just didn't know what people would think, but it got a really nice review on Breaking Bourbon, and that was gone within like 2 hours of launch. So that was a fun surprise for us.
It was well deserved. That thing was and is. I mean, I'm dreading the day that one's empty because I know I'm not getting another one, but I'm sure there will be more in the future.
Well, I will say we bought 4 barrels from them, and as of this release, we'll have released 2 of them. So
so there's at least 2 more coming.
Although I guess it's like 1 and 2/3 now because the third of one of them went to the Far Flung rye.
Sure. So All right. And yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to say about this except this is exquisite. I mean, it's a wonderful blend. Um, I don't know all the specific parts of it, but I feel like I can tell which ones have added you know, their attributes to it.
Yeah, I think if you taste through these again later, if you're tasting through all the samples, we like to start with Far Flung Rye, and then sometimes we also like to end with it as well, because then you've tasted the components and can see how they've all come together and evaluate
Oh,
that.
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what did we decide we were doing next? The Wollersheim?
Let's see. We did the Far Flung Rye. Why don't we stick with the rye for the moment? I think you got a Tom's Foolery rye here.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. So, well, that was a very satisfying cork pull.
That was.
Don't you love that sound when it?
I do. That's one of my favorite sounds. I think everybody likes that sound. Everybody into whiskey, anyways.
Yeah. So this is one of 6 single casks coming out in the Midwest collection, which launches next Wednesday. This one is from Tom's Foolery. It's the nice, pretty green label for rye. It is the oldest whiskey that we've ever released, narrowly beating our last Tom's Foolery cask. So it is a 9-year-old single cask rye, 58.3%. I can't do that math right now, or at least I can, but I refuse to
116.6.
There you go. And I'll let you nose it from there, and then tell you a little more about it.
Okay, so before I even bring this up to my nose, this is the one that I am most excited for. I've said it a couple times already. That Tom's Foolery bourbon blew me away. It literally blew me away. It was so good. And after I tried it, I started looking up Tom's Foolery Distillery and was reading a little bit about them. And I love how they do everything the hard way. I mean, if there's an easy way to do it, it ain't happening there. I mean, they're using wooden washbacks and just wood fermenters, and it's awesome to see that it's like a step back in time instead of a step forward with technology. And they are cranking out some awesome stuff.
Yeah, it really is. I agree with all of that, and it's also a quite small distillery. They're not making a ton of whiskey, so we felt very lucky to be able to get a couple barrels from them. And 9 years is a long time in Kentucky or Ohio, and it's a little cooler up there on Lake Erie than it is down in Kentucky. But so I don't think it gets overwhelming oak.
Okay. That being said, about the size of Tom's Foolery, you have a tendency to not necessarily the smallest craft distilleries, but you guys go after the smaller, more craft distillery, less known, and obviously that's done on purpose. But do you find that you have, I don't know how to put this, you have a better experience with a distillery that is small like that versus somebody who's bigger? And best example I can use for you guys is New Riff is a fairly large distillery, and you've worked with New Riff.
Yeah.
Cedar Ridge, they're smaller, but they're on the larger side of craft, I would say.
Yeah, that's accurate.
And then Tom's Foolery, Corbin Cash, Wollersheim, those are all fairly small on the scale. Do you find a better experience with the smaller distilleries versus the larger distilleries?
I think on the scale we're talking about, not necessarily. Like comparing, like New Riff is the largest distillery we've worked with, and we had a great experience working with them, and ultimately got to the spot where we could work with them to pick some pretty unique barrels from them, especially the one we did that was in a Char 1 cask. But for distilleries that are even bigger than that we don't work with, like Wilderness Trail or Bardstown Bourbon or something like that, those places make great whiskey. Don't get me wrong about that.
Absolutely.
like I buy Wilderness Trail, I really like it, but we don't think we have anything to add there. Like we could potentially get barrels from them at some point, but a lot of other people can get barrels from them too and want to, and we're not going to be able to introduce lots of new people to Wilderness Trail. If you care about whiskey, you probably know about them a little bit already, and if you don't, you'll know them before you know us. But for smaller places, we think we have a lot of value to add. Like people can discover Corbin Cash or Tom's Foolery through us, and we can really showcase what makes them special, or rediscover a place that they tried 5 years ago and has changed a lot since then.
Sure.
And it varies. Like I like working with the really small places like Tom's Foolery or Brooklyn in Brooklyn, because we can really work very closely with them to figure out like exactly what side of them we want to showcase. But I also like the places like Cedar Ridge that are on the medium to large size, so that I can call Murphy up and say, hey, can I get a malted rye barrel? And it's not a big deal. And they're like, yeah, we have like 100 or so of those maybe, or I don't know how many. And we can spare one. So it's different every way. And I think we choose our partners very carefully, and usually choose people that we like, or always choose people that we like to work with. And that goes a long way.
Absolutely. That was kind of the answer I was hoping to get from you. I'll be honest with you. I didn't want to try to put you on the spot to say, yeah, New Riff wasn't as good as somebody else. That's not what I was going for. But the answer you gave was pretty much exactly what I was looking for. You're not introducing somebody to Wilderness Trail or Bardstown or anything like that, but you are introducing people to Wollersheim, classic example, and Tom's Foolery those are places many people haven't even heard of, and now they're able to order it and get a glimpse as to what that distillery does.
Yeah, and even Cedar Ridge, like I find with many of the Midwestern distilleries in general, like even the larger ones often have a pretty regional focus. So I'm regularly running into people who don't know Cedar Ridge, even though it's the top selling bourbon in Iowa and very well known there. If you're on the coasts, does not have that familiarity, and also fun to introduce people to things beyond their bourbon, which we really like. We've done their bourbon before, but their single malt, their wheat whiskey is like they make so much really cool and special stuff. So it's fun to show that off.
Cedar Ridge is quite possibly one of my favorite. It is one of my favorites. I don't know where it lands in the top 5, but it's definitely way up there. You know, sharing space with Andalusia and a few others as well.
So what do you think of the Tom's Foolery on the nose?
I was trying to give it a little time in the glass. This thing it's got a really, really nice, it is a really nice nose.
Yeah, to me, it's so.
There's some things in here that I'm not quite able to even describe.
How fun. To me, it's
and this is, I feel like this is going to be one of those whiskeys that you enjoy it every time you have it, but it's a different experience every time you have it.
I can see that. Yeah. And I think that's true, because I had a glass of this last night too. I was doing a whiskey tasting at a club in Saratoga, New York, and I had a glass of this. And my experience tonight is a little different. It's always the herbal flavors that come out first. People yesterday throwing out notes like dill, which was an interesting one to me, and tarragon, and in addition to the usual rye spice that you get. And the oak is there, but it's not the only feature by any means. It's a component of the whole.
And I always find, for me, the oakiness is the bitiness on the back, or the very drying tannins at the end of the sip. And I'm getting them, but very slightly. Tarragon is something I agree with you on the tarragon. I would have never picked that up without the mention of that, I don't think. But 100%, that tarragon is like almost anise, but herbal at the same time. And yeah, for sure. Dill, absolutely. I'm not picking up any mint, which is cool. I like mintiness in the rye, but I like ryes without the mintiness as well. Citrus notes I get a lot on rye, and I'm not getting any here, so that's fun as well.
I get it a little bit, but it's like not orange, which is interesting. So I don't know if it's like lime peel, maybe.
It
Or,
and maybe it's a different type, and I'm not quite there yet.
yeah.
But yeah, tarragon is that's definitely a great note for this whiskey. I 100% see that.
Yeah. And I think it's a fun comparison to the bourbon, and you should try them side by side later. And I'll be curious what you think because I find I usually like bourbon better than rye, and in this case, I'm the opposite. I like the rye even more than the bourbon. It'll be fun to see what you think when you do them together.
Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, there is not a lot in here that I would say I typically get in rye, minus the dill. I get dill quite often in rye. So, and for me, that's great. I actually enjoy that when a whiskey doesn't fit the mold, so to speak. Like, oh, it's a rye whiskey. It's going to be spicy. It's going to be herbal. It's going to be mint. It's going to be dill. You know, I like it when you get one of those whiskeys and it totally breaks outside of that and is something really unique. And this is definitely there. Um, yeah, I mean, there's things in here that I don't even know if I can describe, but definitely herbal, a little bit of anise.
Oh, I like
I
that.
mean, what are we at for proof? I got it on the ticker, but we're at 58.3. So yeah, very stout.
Yeah,
This is probably one that does this one take water pretty well?
yeah, it does. Yeah.
Their bourbon takes water extremely well as well.
Do you usually like to add a little water to things?
I try to play with it I at least always play with it at least once.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find that it makes it better. Sometimes I find it makes it worse. But having the option is definitely the key there.
Yeah. We have our tasting rooms open in Vermont now, and we do water droppers on every table, even though probably 80% of people are like, why is there a water dropper in this little thing of water on the table? I don't get it. But then we get to explain to them, like, try it and add it a little bit, and it can really bring out different flavors sometimes. It's a good learning experience. Did I lose you?
No, I'm noticing that I'm super laggy, and I'm trying to adjust something so that it goes away. It seems a little bit better now.
Cool. Yeah, you seem okay to me. Your sound sounds great to me. The video sometimes is a little jagged, but I figure it's probably on my end.
Okay. Yeah, so that seems like I might have fixed it, but okay. So yeah, I mean, Townsville, this is 9 years old.
Yeah.
Which if you're newer to craft distilleries, 9 years is an impressive number for a craft distillery.
Yeah, and very, very rare.
So just the patience involved to be able to say, well, we need to sell stuff, but we need to make stuff go.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act there.
And I love that even as a really small distillery, Tom's Flory invested in letting some of those barrels continue to get to that point, because it'll never happen if you keep selling everything as soon as it hits 4 or 5 years old. You have to choose to refuse to sell something just so it gets older, and then not only that, and then give it up to your friendly neighborhood independent bottler when they come knocking. But they even have some 11, probably 12-year-old single barrels on site now. So
wow,
super cool stuff. And that was relatively early for them, and the flavor profiles continue to evolve over time. But for us, this was really in the sweet spot. Although some of the 11s were really, really good too.
Water definitely did bring out some of the more typical rye characteristics here. I'm definitely picking up a little bit of chocolate now. A little that herbalness is still there, but there's an underlying chocolate in there.
And to me, it's very fresh and grassy too, which is what I really like from a lot of ryes, when it's has the spice, but also this freshness to it. And I think this has that.
This is very good. Very, very good.
Yeah.
It was killer to sit here and look at these sample bottles that you guys sent generously, by the way. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
To sit here and wait and look at them and be like, oh, I want to open them, but I waited. So
You were very patient with the winter collection when you had some shipping issues with that. So I'm glad we're able to give you a couple teases in the future here.
there you go. Well, let's see. We're at about 40 minutes. Probably should move on to the next one.
Yeah, let's do the Wollersheim now. And this will be a fun one because you're familiar with them. And I would say you're probably one of the only people I know in the whiskey world who knew them already, which is interesting because I think they're only distributed in Wisconsin, or if it's beyond that, it's not very far. Maybe
it definitely would not be very far if it is outside of Wisconsin. But yeah, they're very Wisconsin oriented. Yes, and I have enjoyed their 2 Mile bourbon, which is their standard bourbon that they put out. I've enjoyed most of the single casks that I've bought. Their Curiosity collection that's the fun one. Since they are a winery and a distillery, they get to play with all kinds of cool casks, and that's what that Curiosity collection is. And they do some really fun stuff.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's a really beautiful site. It has really deep history as a winery, although my understanding is it has not been in continuous operation, but it's been there in some form or other for more than 150 years now. I believe the vines were originally planted by one of the fathers of California winemaking on his way west from Hungary to eventually California, but stopped off in Wisconsin for a while to plant some vines there. And I think that's super cool.
I unfortunately, when I went and visited them, I was not able to take a tour to get any of the in-depth details. The distiller was not there that day, so it was they have the trail up to the upper part of the hill. They have their history on plaques all the way up, and I spent the entire time and read every one of those plaques, and it's extremely neat history. Moving from wine to brandy and then brandy to making other spirits as well. Just really, really neat.
Yeah. And I do think that history as a distillery making both brandy and whiskey is super interesting, especially being in Wisconsin, because I understand you all like the brandy out there. And it's part of the
culture. We do, yeah. We have this thing for brandy, and I'm not 100% sure where it stems from, but I'm all right with it. Brandy's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. It's cool to see that some of those regional traditions around the country still exist. Like in Maine, like everyone in Maine drinks Allen's coffee liqueur, and it's just like a local brand that's been there forever, and people love it, and it's part of the daily drinking culture.
Okay. Yeah. The old fashioned, for example. I mean, classically, it's a bourbon or a whiskey cocktail, and in Wisconsin, the classic old fashioned is brandy. They do a little other weird stuff with it that sometimes people don't like, but it is a Wisconsin thing. So
yeah. It's usually topped with like soda or something, right?
There's a lot of wash in it.
Yeah. Interesting. So our first Wollersheim is a 5-year-old.
I suppose I better put that up here. Yeah. I get in tuned here with what we're talking about, and I forget to do the things that I'm supposed to do.
I do too, which is why I'm like, I need to tell you what this actually is before you drink it. So 5-year-old straight bourbon, cask strength. This is the strongest in this collection at 65.6, so a little over 130 proof. So
and I think their barrel entry proof is 115, if I'm not mistaken.
I think I have to double check for this one. This may have been a little higher because it's
okay.
I'm going to check right now because someone asked me that yesterday and I couldn't remember.
But we have this weird tendency to climb dramatically in proof over the course of 5 years or so. Driftless Glen, they regularly have some hazmat barrels that they bring down. They did recently release one. But Yahara Bay has had some crazy hazmat stuff.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
you're right. I just looked up the barrel entry proof, and it was 116. So
116. Okay.
The nice thing is we've done enough single cast now that I can't remember all the details, but like the most important things like the mash bill we put right on the label, as you know, and things like the entry proof is just like publicly available on our website. Like if a distiller says that we're allowed to say it, and they usually do, we'll say it. Like no secrets for us.
That is the one thing that I don't understand. I just don't understand. Like you guys are willing to put out this distillery, we're going to put it in a bottle, we're going to sell it, we're going to put your name on it, we're going to say where it came from, tell you all kinds of stuff about it. What information don't you want us to have? If I'm a distiller, it's like, man, put it out there. Put it all out there. I'll give you whatever info you want. I
Yeah,
mean,
and most places are. Everyone like some of the big Kentucky places that we don't work with are like, proprietary about their mash bills. But I'm like, why? Like even if you know the
even
exact
if I copied the mash bill, I can't copy the whiskey.
yeah, if you made this exact, even if the head distiller at Wollersheim popped over to Driftless Glen and made the exact same recipe at the same entry proof, same grain, it would end up 5 years later would end up tasting pretty different.
Quite a bit different. The best example of this, the best story I have about that is, I mean, Lagavulin opened next door to Laphroaig and wanted to copy Laphroaig. So they bought the same stills. They're right next door. They use the same water. They use the same barley. They use the same peat, and they cannot make the same whiskey.
Yeah.
And it's right next door.
Yeah,
I mean, it's wild how those might no differences other than being a different person running the still, making the cuts, doing whatever can totally change the whiskey.
yeah, and that's the fun part about whiskey to me is the
Absolutely.
storytelling and the way that small differences can compound into making very different and great different kinds of expressions.
So this smells to me, and this is going to sound cheeky, but this is classic Wisconsin bourbon.
That does sound cheeky, but you have the chops to say that in a way that most other people don't.
It's got just the small touch of medicinal cherry.
Mm.
It's got nice little charred oak in it. It's sweet on the nose. It's caramel. It's praline. It's a little grainy yet, which is really typical for Wisconsin bourbons to be a little grainy.
I've noticed that too. I totally agree.
Mm. The proof shows up on the palate on that one. Whee!
Yeah.
Boy, that's good.
Yeah, at 130, it's higher than we usually see from the Midwest. Most of the rest are in the low 120s. But yeah, it's to me it reminds me of. I mean, it's much stronger, but the closest thing we put out to this in some ways, I think, is the Thomas Foolery bourbon. Well, this is a little more oak forward, but they both have that like they're both very in the forefront with the grain itself, with the corn, and you can really taste that because they're using high quality grain in the first place, and that's what excites me.
This oak forward is definitely a descriptor for this whiskey. It is pretty oak forward.
Yeah, and it's a fun one. I think Wollersheim has been one of the distilleries we've been that people have been really excited about since we announced this collection. It's the one we've probably gotten the most questions about because if you're not in Wisconsin, most people just don't know them.
No, and yeah, it's I know I've shared this with a few friends, some Wallersheim stuff, and they all tend to like it. I don't know as if as they like it as much as I do, but oh yeah, this is good. This is probably one of the better bourbons they put out. You guys did a great job picking this barrel for sure.
Well,
And
thank
how many did you grab from Wallersheim?
you. We grabbed 4 from them. 3 bourbons and a rye,
Mm.
part of which some of which went into the Far Flung Rye. I can't remember if it was all of it or not.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. How many ryes did you get? But yeah, one of them. And yeah, so some of it went into the far flung. What do you do with the leftover?
Sometimes, depending how much we're taking out, like with the Thomas Foolery, we were only using a very small portion of it, so we just left it in the barrel. We never even took it out. We just pulled out what we needed. And if it's like if we're taking half or less, that's usually what we do. There are some things like we did with Flame and Shadow in the winter where we used a large majority of the cask, and then we just move it into some kind of a neutral vessel, whatever's left, or sometimes we barrel it, depending if there's enough for that.
Okay. And let's see. I have so many questions, and I'm trying not to ask all of them because we could be here for 3 days.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we're really trying to emphasize with the Midwest collection is that we're really excited about all the distilleries that we're putting out, the 6 single casks and Far Flung Rye. But we really want people to discover this region in general, the partners that we're talking about, their own whiskeys, and beyond that too. There are lots of other great distilleries in the region, like Spirits of French Lake in Indiana, New Holland in Michigan, tons of places. And I'm curious, the ones I know well in Wisconsin are 45th Parallel, which I really like out west. And I'm curious, and Driftless Glen and Dancing Goat, although I don't think they've released their Wisconsin-made whiskey yet.
They have not.
State are you excited about? I know a little bit about Yahara Bay, but not very much.
So, Twisted Path out of Milwaukee, they're going to be one that I think is definitely worth a look. I'm not certain they're, I know you guys are very discerning as to what you pick. I don't know as if they're quite there yet, but they're very good and they're very much on the track. They are a pretty small distillery, and the rye whiskey that they make is very good. The bourbon that they make is pretty good. Great Northern. If anybody in the chat didn't think I was going to say Great Northern, I would be shocked. They are probably my favorite Wisconsin distillery.
Oh, nice.
He's very small. He just recently moved into a brand new facility. And we did I do a whiskey group in the Northwoods here. Mm-hmm. And we did a barrel pick with them in conjunction with one of the liquor stores that's part of the group. Fantastic rye whiskey. Who else is in? I mean, obviously, 45th, Driftless Glen. Midwest wise, Journeyman is a very good one to look at.
Yeah. In Wisconsin, J. Henry is good, and I think that's distilled at 45th Parallel, though, I believe.
It absolutely is. I like J. Henry's whiskey. Mm-hmm. I get a little grumpy when J. Henry gets all the attention for Wisconsin whiskey, and they don't mention that one of the other distilleries in Wisconsin makes their stuff. Now, J. Henry grows the grains, ships them up to 45th. They distill it to their specs and bring it back down, which all is perfectly fine. But there should be at least a mention, and they do when you take the tour. They tell you, but publicly there should be a mention that, hey, there's another distillery in the state that makes this for us. And I think, if I remember correctly, J. Henry is working on their own, physically distilling their own stuff, but I'm not certain of that yet.
Well, I think 45th Parallel is, at least to me, was one of the big secret and surprise distilleries that we encountered on our big road trip. Because I didn't know that much about them and thought that their whiskey and several of their other spirits were really, really good. Like we bought a bottle of their Dill Aquavit.
Okay.
Area because it's super cool. I think they did a horseradish vodka as well. We're not really vodka drinkers, but every once in a while, Bloody Mary is fun.
Yeah,
and it's a great distillery. We tried to get barrels from them, and we're in the process of it way back in February 2020. And then take a while. Guess why that one ended up?
Yeah, I can't imagine what happened. Yeah.
We're Well, we
I,
need
I
to.
definitely, I would love to see you try to pick that back up again and do some 45th. They have recently released a single malt.
Oh, nice.
Um, the distiller there is Scottish in background, or heritage,
Mhm.
and they released a single malt. I picked it up and I have not cracked it open yet. So I'm excited to open that one up and see how that goes. They are also in a couple days here releasing their first 10-year-old bourbon.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
if I don't think Wisconsin made whiskey, I don't think there's been a 10-year-old yet. So I believe they are the first distillery in Wisconsin to make and release a 10-year-old bourbon.
super cool.
I
That's
know Dancing Goat has released some older stuff, but they're mostly sourced.
yeah. Um, that's super interesting. I'll have to try to find that, and I'm planning a trip to some part of the Upper Midwest later this year, and I may try to swing down that way again. Mostly because I want to go visit Far North Spirits up in way northern Minnesota.
I saw you said something about them today, your blog post, and so that's I didn't mention them because I know you already know about them, but yes, they are fantastic up there.
I feel like the if I could have one more single cask in the collection, it would be something from them. And the only reason that we haven't really is that we have a very firm rule that we have to visit first, and
Hmm.
it's really like that's 6 hours north of Minneapolis. It's hard to get
It's
to.
a I would love to visit them too, and it's an 8.5 hour drive for me.
Wow, and you're way up there too in
And
Wisconsin.
I'm up there. Yeah. Yes. In Marshall in the comments here, Tattersall is another really good Wisconsin, but they're Wisconsin, Minnesota. Not that that matters, but they're a very good distillery. Their rye is fantastic. Their wheated bourbon is superb. Their single malt is very good. They're doing good things.
Didn't they make a an Arby's vodka too?
They may have.
I think they
Um,
did something like
I
that.
know I know there has been an Arby's spirit, and I don't remember what I don't pay much attention to that kind of silly stuff.
Yeah, that's
Um,
uh,
but I mean, if yeah, I mean, it's totally possible.
yeah. But yeah, I was talking with Mike from Far North recently, and he did a guest blog post for us. And he told me that actually it's easier to get there than I thought because we're in northern Vermont. He's in northern Minnesota. And I can actually get a direct flight from Montreal, which is 2.5 hours from me, to Winnipeg, which is 2 hours from him. And that's like way less driving than any other option. So I'm probably going to do it later this year.
Oh wow, cool! You get to break out the passport to visit an American distillery. That's awesome.
Exactly. I just my whiskey back with me, or at least not easily.
Yeah, that place is. I mean, Far North is an accurate name for that place. It is up there.
Yeah.
There is
Super.
not much around there either. I looked at hotels. I think there's maybe one.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for it to not be winter, which means I should probably be able to go by like May. I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't had winter all season up here, so I don't know what theirs is like up there, but we really haven't had anything.
We haven't in Vermont really, at least not in this part of Vermont, except this Saturday we're supposed to get 1.5 feet of snow in like 5 hours. So I'm actually pretty excited for it because we haven't gotten any this year.
Charles, yeah, Charles, I agree. If Tattersall were to really get into the battling of the states, they could do something like this.
I might get themselves in some trouble.
Um, what else is there? I mentioned Twisted Path. I think they're very good, probably at least worth a visit. Um, Tattersall, Great Northern. If you are going to go to Great Northern, yeah, absolutely. Let me know. We'll meet up down there and we'll get in with Brian and we'll get the inside scoop.
Where in the state are they? Are they in Milwaukee?
They are in Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
Okay. Don't know where that is, but I will find out.
So you were at Wallersheim and Prairie du Sac.
Yeah.
So if you go about maybe 30, 40 minutes north of that, you'll hit Wisconsin Dells.
Okay.
And then from there, you're about another hour ish north to hit Stevens Point.
I see. Oh yeah,
They are pretty much smack dab in the center of the state.
that's cool. Yeah. I don't know why there aren't any distilleries up in the North Country or in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but I guess there just aren't enough people there to justify it.
Well, yeah, the and the people that are there, they're still making it in the backyard, in the cover of the woods.
That's fair. Yeah.
We do have a few distilleries up here.
Mm.
Northern Waters is up here, but the focus is mostly spirits for cocktails in their tasting room.
That makes sense. Yeah.
They focus a lot on that because that's how they make the money. So, which is it's not a bad thing to focus on.
Yeah, I think it's hard and it takes a lot of money to run a distillery that has a really serious and dedicated whiskey program where you're laying whiskey down for many years, which is why there are 2,600 distilleries around the country. We've worked with 30, and there are plenty of other really good ones, but it's definitely like a different focus between a place that is like, we're in this to make whiskey for the long haul versus we're basically like our neighborhood distillery and bar making whiskey for cocktails and things, and gin for cocktails and things like that.
Perfect. All right. So we got one more to taste, and I am super thrilled about this one.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that I consider off the wall whiskeys.
Yeah.
You released one of these very similar to this. When was that? Was that 21?
2022. We did our
22
malted wheat whiskey.
Yes.
Cedar Ridge malted wheat whiskey.
So when you released that one, that was a distillery that I had never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And since having that one, I've tried several other offerings from that distillery, and I like everything they do. This one, however, is from a distillery that I know very well and love. This will be Cedar Ridge, and they are putting out a 100% malted wheat whiskey, and is this a white wheat? Is that what I remember?
What malted white winter wheat, which is a mouthful after a couple of whiskeys.
Yeah. It's a mouthful before a couple of whiskeys, after a few whiskeys. It's really crazy.
I forget it. Yeah, the Brooklyn was a malted red winter wheat. They're both 100%
Yep.
kinds of wheat. So, like you said, Cedar Ridge is a distillery that we love too. We've worked with them more than just about anybody else. Like them and Balcones are probably our two most regular distillery partners. And really think they make great whiskey across the board, and thought that this was a really fun way to showcase something a little different from them that you wouldn't normally see at cast strength or really outside of, I think, mostly the tasting room or a little bit in Iowa. So malted winter wheat, 6 years old.
So my question about this is, obviously you have a fairly decent relationship with Murphy.
Yeah.
At Cedar Ridge. Is this something that they do periodically, regularly, seldomly?
I think they make a little bit of wheat whiskey every year and put out just a little bit. But it's not the kind of thing that like lots of people are coming up to knock on your door to say like, give me your wheat whiskey. I need that. It's just not a category that people are that familiar with, but
right.
That doesn't make it any less good.
So Travis is asking, and I know you've fielded this question a few times as well, but Cedar Ridge brandy or rum, do you guys ever think about going into other spirits?
We talk about it. We also talk about going into world whiskey, like whiskey from other countries that have newer distilling traditions. And I think both are fun ideas that we'll probably do eventually, but we want to be sure we can do it right and really understand the landscape of whatever that may be. So we're still new enough as going on our fourth year of releasing whiskey now that we want to stay focused and not do too much crazy stuff. But I love brandy and hope to eventually use some.
Cool. And then he also asked, Cody Road or Mississippi River Distilling.
I know about them in that I know that they exist, but I haven't been there or tried anything that they've made. I know they were part of the Four Kings release that Few Spirits did a few years ago, but haven't tried it on its own.
immediately I am finding perfectly toasted bread with honey on it. I
Well,
mean, I don't know if I could have any better description for it.
that's a good tasting note. You want to write some tasting notes for us sometime?
I mean, I could.
I mean,
You guys do a bang up job anyway, so you don't need my input.
yeah,
I'm just happy to be able to get your stuff and enjoy it thoroughly.
yeah. To me, this is
The common joke between most of the guys in this chat right now, the common joke is that at some point in time, I'm probably on your payroll. Um, I do talk about Lost Lantern every now and then, probably to the point where they want me to shut up about it. uh, but when something's good, you got to talk about it, right?
yeah, and I appreciate it. It's we are still a relatively new company, so I feel like a lot of people are still discovering us, and this is a fun way to get our name out there.
Yeah, if anybody watching either on Instagram or YouTube has not checked out anything from Lost Lantern, absolutely a must do. The release, what is that? The 27th, March 27th is when the spring release goes live. They do have some things left on their website currently. I think you just went through a last drops or a like a fire sale kind of thing.
Yeah, we did some of the last of our summer bourbon. We always save a couple of bottles, so like in case there are shipping issues or something, we can then make sure people get them, and then release the last of those in the spring or in February. But we have some larger releases that we still have available, like our Soaring Spice Frey Ranch Nevada bourbon, and a number of single malts, which I really love, and I know you're a malt guy too, and had probably post them at some point. But some really fun things that we've done.
Tony here is happy that I shared. We got together in February, and I shared some Shadow and Flame with him.
Are you Team Flame or Team Shadow?
I haven't answered the question yet purposefully. And I'm gonna be generic here, and I'm gonna say I'm just Team Lost Lantern. They're both exquisite whiskeys. But if you are forcing me to pick one of the two, Shadow edges out Flame a little bit for me.
Interesting.
It has this malty character that's slightly hidden in Flame, and it just and this only occurred to me actually like 3 nights ago. I had a glass, and I happened to be I was working on the computer, and I had it up by me, and I took a sip, and I was walking away. I wasn't even thinking about what I drank, and I was like, wow, that's very different from what I remember as I was sitting there trying to figure out what I got. And it was really good. Just the right amount of smoke, just the right amount of malt. It was wonderfully balanced whiskey. Yeah, I mean, but we're talking about splitting hairs here. They're both fantastic whiskeys.
Well, thank you. It was those were truly a labor of love in that the amount of people knocking on our door demanding that we make peated mesquite smoke blended malts was zero. But we just really wanted these to exist and explore looking at these flavors and to help drive awareness of American smoked whiskeys. So they're some of my favorites that we've ever done, and I really enjoy pouring them for people. Okay. As for the Cedar Ridge, this is one of the highlights of the Midwest collection for me, just because you never see a wheat whiskey, and a malted wheat whiskey in particular, I think is so unusual and brings so much more complexity than you get from a regular wheat whiskey, most of which are pretty low proof anyway. But it has so much complexity and depth of flavor to me, while also having this soft texture that I associate with wheat whiskeys. Not overpowering at all, I think.
No, and the proof on this is I got it on the ticker. What are we at? 61.6.
Yeah.
This does not drink 60 proof at all, or 60% at all. This is This is one of those dangerous ones where you don't realize it's that hot. And I did put a little bit of water in this, but it all it did was bring everything that I was getting even more so.
Yeah.
That butter, that toasted honeyed bread is still front runner for me.
Yeah, that's a good tasting note. And I feel like this is, I think this is going to be like the Brooklyn where it ends up being a sleeper hit. Like the Brooklyn was an interesting dynamic because when we released that, most people didn't know them, and a few people bought it right away, and then like word started to spread, and then like within a month, it was gone. It was not like a day one sellout, but it was like within a couple weeks there was none left, and then like now I still get people emailing me about it like every week or two, being like, "Hey, are you going to do another one of those? Do you have any more bottles of that secreted away somewhere?" Um, and I think this might be like that. It's like the younger cousin of that.
That I'm so glad I was able to pick that one up when I did, because when I tasted it, it was fantastic, that Berkellen.
Yeah.
And I know we've had this conversation before. How do you pronounce Berkellen? And you had said the distiller doesn't even really know, or the owner doesn't really even know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't just like go whatever way you want.
Yeah. I love that. That's great.
He doesn't want to commit or force it in any one direction. So I usually say Brooklyn, you say Brooklyn. Some people say Brooklyn. It's kind of fun that way.
Mm-hmm.
But a cool distillery. And I really appreciate that some people have started to trust us and say that when we're like, hey, here's an 8-year-old malted wheat whiskey from a place that you probably don't know, that's a little more than $100, that some people are like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna give that a shot, and then see the same thing that we saw in it, then find the things yourself. Like that's what I want. It makes me really happy is when people discover these distilleries, both through us and on their own.
So as far as Lost Lantern goes, you guys release single cast stuff. Obviously, so I gotta have a reference here. Your single cast malt is usually in a brown label.
Yeah.
Then you have your single cast rye, which is a green label, single cast bourbon, which is going to be a red label.
Yes.
Then you do the Far Flung, which is your new label with the kind of like the see-through and blue.
Yeah.
And that works also for any of the blends that you guys do.
Yeah.
The more cream colored label, it's still a single cast, but what does that signify? Because you have an Andalusia in that line, or in that label. That Spirit Works is in that label as well.
Yeah. The kind of pithy answer is that it's for weird stuff. The more serious answer is that it's for things that don't fall cleanly into another category, either because, like in this case, it's a malted wheat whiskey. It's just not something people really know about.
Okay.
Or for like the Andalusia or the Spirit Works or the tequila aged balcones that we did. It's because it's not necessarily what you would expect from the flavor profile of that thing. Where like if we put the Spirit Works rye in the green label and you were expecting it to taste like a rye, it doesn't taste like a rye. It tastes almost more like a gin. The white label tells you that it's going to taste unusual in some way or other.
Okay. And then one of your first releases was the vatted American single malt.
Yeah.
Do you have plans to do something similar, or maybe a Far Flung malt?
We love playing with blending American single malts. So the American vatted malt, our very first release and our largest release to date, actually, was 3,000 bottle run. It's a blend of American single malt from all over the country. We still have a little bit of that available, so that's still out there, and we'll probably do another one at some point once the first one is gone. Or
sure.
But I like the idea of playing with that, and that was actually a collaborative blend where we got all the distillers in a room together to make that blend with us.
Which that's kind of cool, to be in a room with all those people, and kind of collaborate together with everybody. There was a lot of heavy hitters in that room at one time. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And that whiskey, I admittedly waited a long time to buy that. and when I did, I was like, man, why didn't I get this sooner? It's very good. It's very, very good.
Well, thank you. It is definitely one of our flagships. As we say, basically all the blends are our flagships because that's where we have the most clear imprint in that. Like Nora and I made this blend. We blended it together, um, iterated on it. Whereas the other places we're selecting whiskey, sometimes we're blending multiple casks from the same place together, like the Soaring Spice or the Gentle Giant. But the blends, it's really like creating new flavors that couldn't exist on their own. So those are the flagships.
So,
Um,
Travis is asking if you got any weird, unique Cedar Ridge barrels.
we have a couple of barrels of. I'm glad Nora isn't watching this because I'm just spilling all the secrets. But we have a few barrels of peated single malt from them, which one of which went into shadow, and continuing to play with other things. And I'm really overdue for a visit to Cedar Ridge again. I went there in 2019, but haven't been since the pandemic. So I really want to get back and poke around and see what secret things I can find.
It's a fantastic place. It really is.
We do actually have a Cedar Ridge single malt that's still available. That was finished in a sherry cask that I know from Murphy telling me many times was his personal favorite barrel on the property when we took it away. But we didn't know that when we bought it. But it's that's one of our brown labels and our older labels, Cedar Ridge Iowa single malt finished in a sherry cask. But that was a really special one too. If you like sherry bombs, it's like the best American example I've ever seen.
I have been really bad at the comments on Instagram. I'm sorry, everybody. It's difficult to see two comment streams at one time. But whiskey tastings, yes, absolutely. I am a big fan of the weird stuff. I like it when everything plays outside, colors outside the line, so to speak.
Yeah, I like the unusual stuff too. We like to showcase everything, but sometimes it's the secret, unexpected things like a malted wheat whiskey that like I love everything in the Midwest collection. Far Flung Rye is one of our babies. Like Cedar Ridge is the one I'm like was most excited for you to taste. Like the Thomas Foolery, I knew you were already excited for that. This one,
I was extremely excited for that, and you know, obviously, you know, I'm going to most likely buy the entire release. That's just kind of how I do it. I finally caught up and picked up just about everything I could. I did miss some of the Summer of Bourbons, um, not for you know, just because I tend to forget about bourbons a little bit more, and when you released a bunch of them, I picked a few that I thought I would like, and I grabbed those. But yeah, this release, I'm pretty sure I'm going to buy the whole thing. And we have three more here that we're not going to go through tonight. There's a few spirits out of Illinois. It is their straight bourbon bottled at 62.3. There's the Middle West Ohio straight rye, which is super unique. It's a dark pumpernickel rye. I don't know what's the age on the Middle West one.
that is the that's a 4-year-old, 4.5.
That's 4. Okay, so that's pretty, yeah, pretty similar to their standard release of the dark pumpernickel, except this is a single cast strength one. So that ought to be
Intro to
super
Middle
fun.
West if you haven't encountered their stuff before, and I know a lot of people have not yet. It's interesting because that's one that some people are like, oh yeah, everybody knows Middle West, and a lot of people are like, I've never heard of them before.
Yeah, right. I love Middle West. I think they do fantastic stuff. And then the last one here we got is Starlight Bourbon. A lot of people have heard about Starlight. They do amazing things out of Indiana.
The fun thing about that is, I feel like what Starlight is most well known for is doing finished whiskeys, and they have so many of them and so many unique finishes. So we did a straight bourbon from them instead. So instead of doing finish, we did a 6-year-old,
which is super. Yeah, and you're right. They finish a lot of stuff. They are very finish heavy and weird finishes too. Like they explore finishing like I have never seen.
Yeah.
And they do a good job with everything. their rye whiskey is very good. Their bourbon is very good. I did hear that they had a single malt either in the works or released at some point in time. I don't know about that one. I haven't been able to find or hear anything about it.
Yeah, I don't know if they've
But
put it out yet. I'm not sure, but yeah, so many Finnish things. And like I went there about a month ago when I was in Kentucky, so I just popped up. I actually brought the Cedar Ridge team with me to go visit Starlight, which was a lot of fun because Murphy had never been there. And they had a great time geeking out, and the Hubers kept pulling. We ended up in their warehouse with all their different French oak experiments of different types of French oak from different forests, and we ended up tasting like 3 barrels each from like 6 different forests in different regions of France. And after a while, we were like, guys, this is amazing. We're having an amazing time, but we need to go back to Louisville. We have to get ready for this awards show tonight. After they being there for 4 hours, we were like, all right, it's time to go. But it's a wonderful distillery and so inventive and creative. And we love their straight bourbon too. So excited for people to try that one.
so Travis here says he lives in Cedar Rapids, very close to the distillery, actually.
Okay, nice.
So he would love to meet you up for a drink if you go to the distillery there and
Okay, sounds great.
all of that. So
Cool.
all right, and I do have one more question, actually 2 more questions that are along the same line. How do you feel as an independent bottler? And I know there's not very many in the States. Single Cask Nation,
Mhm.
Barrel, Raising Glasses is another one, and I honestly I struggle to think of any more. Barrel Tramp is pretty small still. How do you feel about the news that Single Cask Nation was purchased by SMWS?
I think it's super cool. I hope it lets them continue to do what they've been doing and do it really well, and maybe explore a little more American single malt. And I know they've done a lot. They've done Westland casks going back almost 10 years now, which is a lot longer than we've been doing it. But I love when other places are doing it. The fact that Scotch independent bottlers and places like SMWS are poking around American whiskey a little bit, I think is a very positive sign for the industry that this is the old guard, this is the old school, and they're coming over here and looking at the great whiskey here and being like, we need to showcase this to our members. And I think that's great.
I agree with that statement 100%. It's very interesting that SMWS has been in America and buying single casks of American single malt and putting them out and doing things like that. And and lack of information here, I don't know, but I know Barrel Craft Spirits has been in the news lately. Their building came up for sale. Is that a loss of another American independent bottler, or is that just something that they're doing on the side?
So as a whiskey journalist, as I was and still sort of identify as, I did some digging on that when those rumors were coming out too. And I'm unconvinced that anything serious is going on there. I think
Okay.
that I don't think it's impossible. But from what I could tell, it seems like it may have been one of their older buildings, or could just be natural. Like they just got a big new facility. I haven't done enough digging to say for sure one way or another, but my impression is that my hope is that they're going to be making really good whiskey for a long time to come.
My initial thoughts on it were they're just selling a building. I don't think they're in any position where they were struggling or hurting. I think they're very popular. They pretty much sell what they put out. So
Yeah.
business wise, if they're planned right, if they're selling what they put out, they're doing okay. So I didn't think there was anything bad there, but it seems to be making a lot of people in an uproar in the community. I see a lot of stuff about it. So
Yeah, I will reserve judgment until I see anything more definitive one way or another. But
sure, yeah. I thought the news for Single Cast Nation selling to SMWS was interesting. I don't know how that's going to change Single Cast Nation for the better or worse, because SMWS is a subscription base and Single Cast Nation was not. So I don't know how that's going to proceed, which is the other thing. I mean, you guys procure exquisite barrels from distilleries all over the country, and you are not a subscription base. It is a, this is what we have, order it, buy it. And I love that because, I am a SMWS member. I like the single cast stuff from them, but it seems to their prices increasing on a regular basis plus the membership, and it seems to be almost seems to be like, and this is a very generic statement, but quality seems to be diminishing as prices are increasing, and you're still having to pay a membership in order to be even able to buy those things. I think your business model is absolutely perfect for what independent bottlers should be.
Okay.
We have 250 bottles of this available. When it's gone, it's gone. That's the last of that one. We'll do another one right behind it.
Yeah. Only hard thing is that sometimes the bottles go pretty fast, and then a bunch of people get upset or sad that they missed it. But yeah, there's no real solution to that except to keep finding more great stuff.
Yeah, just do more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all I can say is I spoke to Nora, and I actually recorded an episode of One Nation Under Whiskey, the Single Cast Nation podcast, the day that the news officially came out, or maybe the day after. And so Joshua and Jason were like riding high on it, and they're very, very excited about it. My impression is that they'll keep their separate structures, and from what I know, which is just as an outsider, but they seem very excited, and I'll just truly let them build it into what they've always wanted it to be, and to do more and continue to work with great distilleries from all around the world. So
excellent.
We're excited for them.
That is what I like to see. Like, yeah, sure, we're buying you, but you're still able to do what you want to do.
Yeah,
that's a big thing. And I know there's lots of stuff in the news about, companies such as Diageo and Remy and all, the very big spirits conglomerates coming in and buying craft distillers that are doing well. And I'm hoping that doesn't turn anything bad for those distillers. I hope they're allowed to keep their creative control. Obviously, Balcones is one of them. Westland is going to be another. So on and so forth. I hope their creative control is still embraced and allowed, and they can still do what they want to do, and just get the support and help from the larger company instead of the control. And this is what we need you to do.
And I think that some of the bigger companies, at least, are. I mean, they're got very big for a reason, and usually, like, they're buying these companies because they're creative and because they're doing interesting and unique things that nobody else is doing. So I also very much hope that they're able to keep their creative spirit, and I think in at least in many cases they will be, and may even thrive under the new arrangements.
Yeah, I hope so. Thriving is what I hope for. So, but on that note, I mean, I don't think there's a better whiskey to end it on. This malted wheat from Cedar Ridge is, as much as I really, really enjoyed that Tom's Foolery, this almost might be the sleeper of the series.
That is that's why we end on it, because this is the one I'm most excited to see how people react to it, and the reaction has been very, very positive so far. So glad you feel the same way. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was fun to chat with you about these.
Thank you for coming on and agreeing to come on. That was way more than I had ever anticipated. The sending of the samples incredibly generous, and I really, really do appreciate that. Far surpasses anything I ever imagined.
Well,
So
thank you so much. And yeah, it was a pleasure. And I'm excited to hear what you think about the other three when you try them too.
I will let you know one way or another. I will let you know how it somehow I will let you know how I think about them.
Sounds good. But yeah, for anyone who's checking us out and doesn't know us before, the website is lostlanternwhiskey.com. I see you've got it pinned there. Check us out. Spring collection, Midwest collection comes out next Wednesday, March 27th.
March 27th. Mark your calendars. And if you guys are not signed up for the newsletter, you do get a little bit early access being signed up with the newsletter.
Yeah.
I think you go live at a certain time, and the newsletter subscribers get what, an hour or half an hour
Yeah,
ahead of.
newsletter goes out at 12 Eastern next Wednesday, and then the website, which will have a password for the shop, and then the password comes down an hour later, and sometimes that hour makes all the difference for some things.
If also if Lost Lantern lostlantern.com doesn't ship to you, Sealbox does get their releases the same time, and there is another one out of California.
Yeah, there are a few places in California. So if you're out there, if you're in New York, there are a few select retailers that will get some of these. So those will be on our website, or you can hit us up on Instagram at Lost Lantern Whiskey, and we can point you in the right direction.
Well, Charles, we'll have to do some rectifying of that situation.
I think I missed that comment.
He said he said you guys don't ship to him, and neither does Sealbox. He lives in a state where they don't like things to be shipped into.
Wow.
So we have to we work around it.
Yeah, gotta find somebody somewhere else that you can ship to, I guess. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, we have a good network of people that will help everybody out. So
yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much again. I gotta hop off. But
yep. All right, everybody, thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed listening to Adam answer some silly questions and me going through some excellent whiskeys. Check them out, lostlantern.com. Read all about them. And on the 27th, pick a few spirits to order.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers.